It's all alive again at the National Stadium. Speeds. Was he held? Yes! Penalty! So often in the past, Wales have suffered because of penalties in vital matches.
Gordon's there. Guilt, surely. A handball. Penalty kick. It's a penalty kick to Scotland.
Paul Bowden to take it. Oh, and he's hit the crossbar. Sensational from Hal Robson-Kanu.
Bill! Gareth Bale, NBE.
These home forwards are in fighting trim. John Charles again passing to Tapscott. He shoots and it's in. Wales have opened the scoring.
Great job, Rhian Rush! Yes! 1-0! And Wales have finished with a bit of a swagger.
So it's a warm welcome from Canada. He has his own podcast, or is involved with his own podcast around Canadian football. We're going to hear a little bit more about that. We're going to look ahead to the friendly game on Tuesday. So it's welcome to the podcast. Croeso in Welsh, it's Elias Grigoriadis. How are you, Elias?
I'm doing great, Russell. Thank you so much for having me.
No, you're very welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself then, and where you are in Canada, and maybe how you fell in love with the game and things like that.
Yeah, I'm based in Montreal. We have a podcast, and I work for the Canadian Press covering CF Montreal, which is the local club here. And I've been in love with soccer for forever. I mean, for most kids in Canada, soccer is kind of something you do in the summer to stay fit for hockey season. And then once you hit the ages of like 8, 9, you start to realize, oh, I really do enjoy this. And, a lot of it came from my grandfather specifically, who was a massive football fan. He was growing up in Athens. He was an Ike supporter, and he was maybe the main driving force in the enthusiasm for soccer. And then, through that, me and my brother got really into it. And then, hockey and soccer shared equal footing. And and then I'd watch everything locally, and then I kind of discovered the European game in my teenage years when I had access to the internet, and they weren't always on TV back then. So from that, I kind of your scope of appreciating the game expands. And then from then I discovered journalism, and I got into journalism in university, and then it was a logical jump. And since COVID now, so since the summer of 2020, I've been working for the Canadian Press. And before that, even I was covering all sorts of different sports.
And the podcast you're involved in?
It's called The Ball Is Round. I joined that about 2.5 years ago, and we cover everything related to Montreal and Quebec soccer. We cover the men's team, CF Montreal. We cover the Roses, which is the new professional women's club. There's also going to be a second division professional club coming to Montreal next year, which we'll probably be covering as well. And of course, both men's and women's national teams. We follow all that very heavily, so there's never a dull moment.
Yeah. For me, I just associate Canada playing at the 86 World Cup in Mexico, which is the first World Cup I can remember, and was just, could not wait for that World Cup. And Wales weren't there, sadly. I mean, we were only one of the home nations who weren't, but it was the latest in a league. I came to understand was the latest in a long line of glorious qualifying failure, often by the narrowest of margins as well. Yeah, and I can remember, being aware that it was Canada's sort of first tournament and our first World Cup, and obviously I wouldn't have known a huge amount about Canadian football or any football from many of the countries competing, but I came to realise that there was a Welsh guy in that squad and fairly sort of central in the team. He played in all those games, Paul James, from Cardiff, where I'm living and was born, and was sort of slightly obsessed by this guy because we didn't have many Welsh players playing in World Cups, obviously. We had Kevin Sheedy, born in Wales. He was playing for the Republic of Ireland then in sort of 1990. But so Paul actually went to the same school as Gareth Bale. So obviously when we got to 2022, and your guys were there as well, of course, any notion that maybe, Gareth Bale, these were the first Welsh players to play in a World Cup since 1958, which is our only other previous appearance, but any notion that he might have been the first, Bale might have been the first sort of Whitchurch High School pupil to play in a World Cup, I was very quick to disabuse people of, because Paul James had been there previously, and I know he's lived a bit of an interesting life since, but maybe that's for another day. And I have, as I said, I've done a little bit of research into his life, written about him a little bit as well. I won't claim to have the writing journalistic chops that I'm sure you have, Elias. But yeah, no, he's an interesting character. I know he settled in, I think it's Toronto, and when his family emigrated. And I'd love to know a little bit more about the two games that our countries played against each other in the warm-up to that World Cup. I think we sent over a team to play you twice to help you get fighting fit for your games. It was one apiece in terms of victories. And there's a lovely picture of Paul chatting to, afterwards, if you look deep enough on the internet, there's Paul chatting post-match to one of the Welsh players, a guy called Neil Slatter. Didn't play a huge number of games for Wales, but was in and around the squad in the early to mid 80s. And of course, they'd been former Wales schoolboy teammates. But obviously, Paul had qualified for yourselves by that point, and they played against each other. So there's a lovely picture of them, just kind of, by the looks of it, just having a little bit of a chat after it and shooting the breeze. But yeah, like I said, maybe for another topic for another podcast.
I mean, that's one of the nice things about being a nation of immigrants, is that no matter who you're playing, when it comes to international friendlies or competitive games, there's going to be people with connections to the other side, the other team, no matter what.
Well, is this where we talk about Gabriella Biancheri? Because I know he spent some time with, Jesse Marsh invited him over to spend some time. It would have been during our off season here in the UK. Mm-hmm. He's back with I think it's the under-19s, or it might be the under-21s. I think he's with this time, which means, I suppose, in one sense, he's a step closer to the senior team. Not that we do it that sort of sequentially. I mean, in fact, there's a couple of players that pretty much have jumped the 21 straight into the senior squad in the current sort of squad, actually. But yeah, I mean, do you know a huge amount about him?
Not until recently, when again, all the news of the tug of war, if you will. But again, this is kind of one of the things that Canada's looking at, that the US has done fairly well, was attracting people who did not come up through the system, and maybe who were caught up in deciding, where their future lies. And Canada's done it with varying degrees of success. The most prominent one that didn't end up working out was obviously Fikayo Tomori, who decided to stay with in the English national system, and now doesn't really get that much of a look, but that's the reality of international football, right? There's other ones now that have come in, people like Promise David, or people even like Ike Ubo, who have now integrated into the group and are crucial. But it's, especially when you're a national team side where soccer is not as necessarily ingrained in the culture, and your talent pool is still big, but it's not necessarily as prevalent as European countries where almost everyone starts off playing. You have to also kind of be opportunistic and pragmatic when you see the opportunity to recruit somebody who technically fits the criteria to play for your national team, even though you would not initially expect it.
No, exactly. And he's born in Cardiff. There's obviously Italian influence. I mean, that's clearly obvious from the name. And I know that Italy were interested, and there was an irony when he scored against Italy for one of our age grade teams. But it was a bit of a surprise that he was then called up to Canada, because I don't think a lot of people knew that he had that eligibility available to him.
I definitely didn't.
But I think one of the things that we've got, I mean, obviously we any number of players who are born outside of Wales, mainly in England, who qualify through parents. I mean, we've got David Brooks in the team, and you've got sort of, Rabbi Matondo on the fringes of the team, Chris Mepham at the minute, Carl Darlow. We'd asked Carl at least 3 times, I think, in the past, if he wanted to play for us, the Leeds goalkeeper. Leeds now, he's played for a few different clubs down the years. It turned us down every time. His grandfather was one of those players in the 1958 World Cup, a chap called Ken Leake. Played a number of times for Wales, scored a few goals, and kept turning us down, and eventually relented. I don't know if maybe Craig Bellamy's got some compromising pictures of him or something, but he managed to finally persuade him where others had failed to. And so obviously, Carl's another example, and there's tons more. I mean, we're a small country, and our borders are a little bit more porous in regards of the other home nations here, and that's kind of how it is, really. But like I said, it was a bit of a surprise when we heard he was going to spend some time with you. But we encourage players to go and spend time. That's part of our kind of pathway, Welsh way, in inverted commas, sort of way in which we the culture, if you like, of the whole sort of setup, all the way from like schoolboy and the whatever it is, 16s, 19s, 21s through to the international, the full team, is to encourage people, if they are qualified for other nations, is to go and speak to the people involved in those other camps and to go and sample it. Because I think, and certainly a chap called Oshan Roberts, who's I think over in Como at the minute, but he's been involved with a couple of other clubs. He was Patrick Vieira's assistant at Crystal Palace for a while, for example. He was involved with Morocco, who've having a cracking couple of years at the moment, and he was very much keen to sort of say, it's part of the players' education. That's what it's about. It's as much about preparing players to be full Welsh internationals as it is to look at them as individuals and what is best for them. And if by going to spend time with other camps and other countries helps broaden their horizons and makes them better players, well, that's great. And yes, there's a little bit of a risk in there, but more often than not, it kind of works for us. So, in the sense that they want to spend time with us. David Brooks is a perfect example of that, and he's a player I absolutely adore. But yeah, I'm looking here as well. There's one player where we both missed out on, I suppose. So we can maybe, as much as there might be some competition for Biancheri, Owen Hargreaves, of course. He was born in Calgary. I'm looking here. He qualified for England, I think, via his dad. Wales via his mum. I don't think he played any representative football for Canada. He played for our under-19s a handful of times.
No, he didn't. I'm like 90% sure he didn't. I think it was all just Welsh and English.
Yeah, he's a poster boy for one of those ones that maybe who escapes our clutches. But Ethan Ampadu is another one that comes to mind. These have been with us right from day one. And I think he might be an example where actually he didn't want to even spend time with an England camp. He knew where his heart and his focus and his career lied, very early on, and he qualifies via his mum. There's a lot qualified via their mum, actually. So maybe it's the mothers, maybe they're mother's boys. I don't know. Maybe it's the maternal influence that's stronger than any paternal influence.
Mother knows best.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. I don't know. So yeah. Anyway, let's look ahead to the game. Obviously, we had our long trip over to Kazakhstan. We weren't great. In fact, the second half was pretty poor, actually. So if any Canadian fans have looked at that game at all, or even the highlights and seen the chances, the balance of play and the balance of chances that were more in Kazakhstan's favour, you're probably thinking there's a win here for you if you go about it the right way. That's been a little bit of a pattern of our play under Craig Bellamy. We're still waiting perhaps for a signature performance that's like a full kind of 90, where you went out, you got yourself ahead, you managed the game, you limited the chances, any decent chances. We haven't done that yet, but there's goals in us, and we've used friendlies in this way to blood players a little bit, just to broaden that pool because of the travel, because of the distances involved to Kazakhstan. I'm expecting a lot of changes to be rung going into Tuesday. But give us a flavour of what Canada are doing in this window. You beat Romania 3-0 the night after our Kazakhstan game. Mm-hmm. Although on paper that looks a comfortable win, Romania had some chances, and if maybe they'd put one or two of them away, they might have been a different result. I mean, their second goal was an absolute shocker.
Yeah.
It was like 6 minutes worth of highlights I looked. So, I mean, you can read too much into it. But you reminded me a little bit of us. Quite adventurous, get forward, good movement, there's intent. It's not a conservative approach to the game, really kind of going for it, but potentially leaving yourself open to conceding some chances. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about what's going on in the window.
I mean, that's exactly it now, right? They don't have to worry about preparing for any kind of qualifier. You mentioned how hectic it gets in Europe, in North America, or in CONCACAF, which is North America, and the Caribbean. It's an octagon, so you play your groups, and then 8 teams make it into the final, and it's a round robin. It's a total mess, but it's also a lot of fun because it's extremely unpredictable. But Canada doesn't have to go through that, because Mexico and the United States are already settled. So all these are friendlies now, which is basically your objective, or what I'd like to see from Jesse Marsh and Canada Soccer is identifying a philosophy, because we've seen a lot of energy, and we've seen a lot of good connections and good bits of quality that Jesse Marsh has done and has coached into this side, but there's no real prevailing footballing identity that the group has yet. And so They've got a lot of talent. They've got a lot of pace. And this is a team that loves to be as dynamic as possible. But, you know, when it comes down to breaking down low blocks and breaking down very resolute defenses, it's still a little bit complicated because they don't have those patterns. They don't have an instantly recognizable set of, you know, 4 or 5, you know, routines that they can go through when they want to break defenses down. So when it comes to the game against Romania, the one thing that that impressed me the most was the wing play, because, you know, they play in a 4-4-2 with Jonathan David often playing with a far, you know, more physically imposing target man, and Jonathan David will maybe drop in a little bit and he'll play a bit as a second striker instead of, you know, 2 proper 9s. But the wing play is where they really generate their progress going forward. So I think that was very impressive, but that's also because Romania really did not play that well. Again, they have their World Cup qualifying match coming up, so they rested a lot of important players. But again, it was really just a case of Romania letting Canada have way too much of the ball in way too dangerous areas on the pitch. So defensively speaking, you're also right. When you play in a 4-4-2, especially such a rigid 4-4-2 that Jesse Marsh employs, you leave a lot of space to get countered, especially in the middle of the field. And they did, right? Maxime Crépeau, who was in goal, had an excellent game. Luc de Fougerolles and Derek Cornelius, who were the center-back pairing, were super solid and kind of cleaned up any kind of potential danger for the most part. But the threat was there, and Romania managed to get the ball uncontested, or were able to, you know, attack with pace in some really dangerous parts of the field because Canada were caught out. So they didn't pay for it that game, but, you know, you come up against a team that's either in better form or is a bit more clinical, and yeah, you will suffer a lot of goals. So I'm happy what I saw going forward because they were clinical when they had the chances. And, you know, again, at the end of the day, you have to play against a team in front of you. So if Romania is giving you all this room, take the room. But I'd love to see them, again, become a bit more consistent with what we're seeing them do on the field. And also, obviously, you know, shore up those gaps that become quite problematic when they lose possession.
So in terms of the personnel, you mentioned a few names there. Was that lineup against Romania, was that, you know, more or less a first choice? Was it maybe trying out a few players, fringe players, maybe a couple of new caps? How much of a first choice 11 was that then the other night?
In terms of available right now, 100%, that is probably the strongest 11. Another debate is between Promise David and Tani Oluwaseyi, who are the second striker next to Jonathan David. But right now, in my eyes, this is the strongest 11 you can get. Again, you know, Alphonso Davies is injured, Alistair Johnson is injured, Moise Bombito is out, so is Sam Adekugbe. So that's almost an entire back line onto itself. That's currently out and unaccounted for. But everything else, absolutely, that's just probably, you know, if they had to play a competition right now, this is the 11 they'd go with.
Yeah, well, we've got a few injuries as well, and so we were really pleased. Probably the bright spot, the only bright spot, dare I say? Well, other than getting the 3 points, obviously, and sometimes winning ugly is what you've got to do. But like I said, there's becoming a slight sort of pattern to our performances under Bellamy, where we're giving. We have these just 10 minutes where we just seem to have switched off and we just seem to forget the game plan. There doesn't seem to be a game plan that we just seem to lose organisation and focus. It's hard to pin down what it is, but it was more than just 10 minutes the other night. It was more or less the entire second half. But we had a young chap called Dylan Lola, who's just broken into the Cardiff City team. Obviously they're now in League One, down in the third tier here, and that relegation, frankly, and I mean, Cardiff were practically inactive in the transfer window. Barely did any business, but that's fallen in this lad's favour. There's a couple of other young Welsh players as well, and he was brilliant. He was really, really good, and we wouldn't be at all surprised if, you know, even you're 19, you've just made your international debut, you're playing for your club, your hometown club, more or less as well. He probably just gets through on adrenaline. Another 90 probably available to him. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we did see him play again. Certainly would come on from the bench for a few minutes, I would imagine, if he doesn't start. But we were pleased with him, but I think we'll be ringing the changes. So would you expect Jesse Marsh to be doing the same, or is he going to sort of go again and maybe ring it at half time perhaps?
I was honestly surprised with how strong this lineup was. I thought that he would maybe look to experiment a little with the lineup against Romania and kind of field a more decisive 11 against a team like Wales, who are looking very good to qualify for the World Cup and very well could be a team that they end up in a group with. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he did again start a lot of the players that he expects to field at the World Cup, or that currently in the pecking order or higher up. And then maybe with some slight changes, we didn't see anything from Jeminet Lebel or Mathieu Chouanière, who have had runs in the national team. Theo Bair, who just changed clubs, and he's had a great time in Scotland, and now he's looking to, continue his good run of form. Again, it's the same thing. It's Jonathan David up top with another physically imposing target man that can kind of play with his back to goal, and Theo Bair fits that profile really well. But in terms of starting, I'd like to see Promise David start. I'd like to see, again, it's a little bit of local bias, but Mathieu Chouanière and Nathan Silva both came up through the Montreal Academy, and they're both top players, so just like Ismail Kone. So the three of them actually came up through the Montreal Academy, which is nice. I'd like to see them get some more time. But in terms of the back line, maybe Joel Waterman gets a look in. He came off the bench, and him and Luc de Furgerolles are kind of competing for that third string spot. Because when everyone's healthy, Moise Bobito and Derek Cornelius are the two. That's not really up for debate currently, unless somebody has an extreme improvement in performance. But I think Joe Wadman is probably going to get more minutes against you guys just to, again, get a better sample size.
It was Jonathan David that scored the opener, wasn't it, against Romania?
Yes.
Yeah, and it was sort of a header from was it a free kick or a corner? It was a set piece, wasn't it?
It was a free kick from Ali Ahmed.
Yeah, that's right, and he kind of steals across the defender, and very well taken goal as well. So this was Jonathan David was one of the players that Welsh fans probably will know more about than maybe some of those other names. Yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit experimental and perhaps on the part of both teams. And I suppose it's one of those, as these friendlies tend to be, particularly in the second, in our experience, say if the friendly is the second game in a 2-game window, it can be, those changes start to be rung sort of midway second half, and the pace of the game can fall away a little bit, which can lead it to be a little bit of a less compelling spectacle, shall we say. But I'm hoping that's not the case.
Well, I think especially with a team like Canada, where, there's, again, like you said, Jonathan David is one, but most people don't have a set spot in this lineup. So the lineup is still very much up in the air, and everyone's fighting for a job. So even people that come off the bench, at least, in theory, should be chomping at the bits to get out there to kind of prove themselves.
I mean, obviously the World Cup's still a year away. If it was coming up in a month or 6 weeks' time, did you think Jesse knows would it be a 23-man squad? How many of those are already inked in and pretty solid? Honestly,
I'd say about 15.
Really?
Yeah, like you look at you look at some of the subs that were used, except for Mathieu Chouanière, who was an unused sub. Everyone else is pretty much what you're going to get if, again, it's in a month, right? Alphonso Davies is back in training finally. I don't think he's going to be ready for the next window, which is in November, if I'm not mistaken. So, and again, same thing with Alistair Johnston, and Moise Bobito is still recovering from a fracture. So I think all these guys, come World Cup time, obviously will be fit. Knock on wood, but right now this is the group he's going with. I don't think there's anyone, at least the 15, that's probably going to be, his starting 11 and then his substitutes.
But to my mind, then, and again, I'll defer to your expertise and your knowledge on it. But to me, that sort of sounds as if there's players who think actually these are games where I can maybe force my way in, or I can push my way up the pecking order at least. Though they are friendlies for Canada, there's still a lot riding on it. There's places to really kind of nail down in that World Cup squad.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's arguably, right now, like 3 or 4 spots on the pitch that are locked down. As in, these players are unquestionably starters. There's Jonathan David, there's Steven Eustachio, who, has played for Porto and is the captain, and there's Derek Cornelius, who has been, far and away the most reliable center back, in the last couple of years. Everybody else, it's not a sure thing. Tejan Buchanan's in great form. Ismail Kone is doing great. Nico Seeger has been a revelation since he showed up with the national team about a year ago. But none of them, they're not immune from being displaced if somebody else is playing well, if there's a drop-off in form. So, yeah, everyone is still fighting for a job. And that I think that's going to be the case up until June 2026.
I suppose what I'm getting at with that line of questioning is, does that maybe lend itself for this friendly, maybe having a little bit more intensity, and there's a little bit more competition that perhaps there's sometimes. Again, it's unfair comparison because I know some of it was kind of under COVID conditions, but I know we played Mexico in a friendly at Swansea, and we beat them, and it was pretty low key, and I thought I thought Mexico were very neat, very tidy, very technical, as you can imagine, but they weren't really the quality that I was expecting from them, and maybe that's where Mexico were at the time, or indeed might still be. I won't confess to know CONCACAF all that well, but I was expecting a little bit more of a challenge, and we dealt with it okay. And that was a fairly young time. It wasn't a first choice team, so some of the players that maybe are first choice now, that was the sort of game that helped them, get establish themselves in the squad. But it was under a different manager as well at that point. So that's one of the games I can think of. I mean, we've played sort of Gibraltar, for example. I mean, a very weak nation, and we used, crikey, could even be sort of third, fourth, fifth choice players in certain positions for that. So I don't think we'll be ringing the changes to that extent. But I would imagine players, perhaps, like as I said, Dylan Lawler, Charlie Crew, young Leeds midfielder who's already won a couple of caps. He's very highly rated. He's on loan at Doncaster at the moment. I wouldn't be at all surprised if someone like him potentially starts, maybe alongside maybe an older head. Or I say an older head, I mean, not particularly that much older, but someone like Jordan James came on in Kazakhstan. He's forced his way into the first choice team immediately. He'd been a revelation for us. Because for us it's early in the season as well. There are some players maybe who were still trying to sort out their move in a transfer window, which was still open when they joined camp ahead of the Kazakhstan game. So Craig Bellamy did talk about that being a slight sort of distraction that they've had to manage. Some players maybe finding themselves maybe not playing. Others are finding themselves in new surroundings. They're playing, but they may be having to adjust to a new squad and a new system and things like that. I think a couple of the players at Wrexham, for example, Kiefer Moore scored for us the other night, and he's playing in a different system, having just joined Wrexham. So there's a lot that we're having to sort of contend with as well. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if again we're lacking that little bit of fluidity, which tends to be a little bit of the pattern at the moment under Bellamy.
I see this game being, having an edge to it. I think one thing that I've noticed, especially the last year and a half, well, since the World Cup basically, is that this Canadian side plays with a chip on their shoulder whenever they play against European teams or teams of a bit more significant status, if you will. Canada has just now kind of broken into the upper echelon. I'm not going to say they're top tier, but maybe say the upper third of footballing countries. And with the way the World Cup went, where they didn't win a single game, they scored one goal, it's still being dismissed as they finished third place in the fourth place. In the Copa America, which is nice, but again, they still don't have maybe necessarily the kind of international reputation that America or Mexicans do, and so you could tell they still play with that. I need to prove myself as a group now. It's kind of a group philosophy. And I think that for that reason, again, whenever they play against Romania, a lot of moments it's a friendly, and even when it was 3-0, the game was done, it got really testy. So even if the game slows down a bit after the subs, I think that's going to be there's going to be some spice to it, that's for sure.
I know the results maybe didn't go their way, but I thought you played really, really well in the World Cup with quite a lot of attacking intent, and were bold and were brave, and you made a better fist of it than we did.
But I think that's also, you guys technically got 1 point more. So, when you look at it, when it's all said and done, you guys technically did better. But yeah, there was a lot of good play. They should have beat Belgium. But the fact that they didn't, and then, all this hype leads to 0 points and you crash out in the group stage, that definitely affects the psyche.
Oh, well, what you're saying then does bode well for Tuesday, that although it's only a friendly, maybe there's a little bit more riding on it than is often the case with these games, and it's interesting to see kind of where the game kind of falls in terms of a fixture, in terms of that wider context of Canada, where they're at on the global stage, and trying to maintain that status, but maybe take a few more steps ahead. So I'm looking forward to it. Is there anything you want to ask me? And
my main thing is doing a bit of research. Is it always 3/5 at the back? Is that something that's a fixture of Bellamy's lineup, or is that really just on a team by team basis?
The role of fullbacks, wingbacks these days, and fullbacks becoming kind of supplementary midfielders and inverted fullbacks. That's such a contemporary kind of tactical phenomenon, I suppose. He very much likes that. and he likes his wing backs pushing on. But that's partly because we've got quite attacking wing backs in the main. Having said that, we're a little bit thin in the centre of defence. So Ben Davies has been playing as a sort of either the left of three, or has played just the left centre in a four, in a more of a flat back four. But and Ben Davies isn't as athletic as, say, for example, a Nico Williams on the other side. Nico's a very attacking, still can be quite raw defensively. I mean, if I look at the highlights of the Romania game, you attacked quite a bit, like you said, down the flanks and down the left. If it was Nico playing on the right, your left-sided players are licking their lips, but they also know they're also going to be under the pump as well, because he's going to be getting at them and getting past them, and he can run all day. So, but then Nico played the other night, so I'd be surprised if he's got another 90 in him. He may have 30 minutes off the bench towards the end, maybe. But Connor Roberts usually plays and has been, virtually an ever-present for us ever since he made his debut under Ryan Giggs. Connor's unavailable at the moment. So we've got a young Cardiff player playing in the squad. He's had a couple of call-ups lately, towards the end of last season, but those were more just to kind of expose him to the surroundings, get to know him to know us, kind of thing. A young guy, African origin, I think Zimbabwean origin, but from Cardiff, Ronan Capacchio, looks very athletic, and he very much looks that modern fullback / wing back who's going to be expected to do a lot of work up and down. Looks tidy on the ball as well, though. Just got into the Cardiff sort of first team, but he's playing at League One level. It's the third tier here, so this could be a step up in terms of calibre of opponent. Maybe I wouldn't be at all surprised. He didn't figure against Kazakhstan, so I'd expect him possibly to get some minutes. So I don't know. He isn't wedded to a formation, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if it was a 4 again, because we're a little bit thin in terms of numbers, and I think that maybe kind of forces his hand a little bit, in which case if it is Ben Davies over on the left, he's not that athletic, powerful fullback up and down, very tidy in the ball, reads the game incredibly well. He's our organiser, he's our arranger, indeed he'll be our captain because Aaron Ramsey isn't in the squad at the moment. So what you'll tend to see is a little bit more sort of lopsidedness. If we are attacking down the left and Ben is getting forward, then somebody's going to be covering because he doesn't necessarily have the legs to get back. Whereas if we're attacking down the right, Ben is just that solid insurance at the back and can kind of cover into that kind of that fullback kind of stepping into midfield to become that supplementary midfielder. We don't have Ethan Ampadu, which, again, very mobile midfielder. So that affects a little bit of the balance defensively. And I think that possibly was a factor, the other night against Kazakhstan. He didn't start Jordan James, and I can only assume that's because he doesn't have enough football in his legs this season, because there's been a lot of rumours that he was going to return from France. Josh Sheehan's a very competent player, but again, he's a League One player. But he knows his role and he knows his limitations and he does what is asked of him. So he's a very reliable player. But I mean, he's not, like I said, he's not even championship level. I'd be surprised if Josh plays from the start again. I would expect Jordan James to be in there. He gives us a lot more mobility. He gets around the park a lot quicker, a lot more efficiently, a bit more power in his game. But I know that Bellamy would like to see him played a little bit further forward as well. I'm not sure we've got the numbers, though, to allow that to be the case. In which case someone like Charlie Crew gets played. And these are players, to a large extent, are unknown quantities because we don't really know a lot about them because they haven't played much football at any level for any club, really, let alone for the national team. So it is an interesting one, and I'm not 100% sure. He keeps us on our toes, does Bellamy. There weren't many people seeing that lineup on Thursday night. If anybody had that on their Wales starting 11 bingo, they'd have cashed in big time because it was a bit of a surprise to us. Because we've got a big window next month. We've got England in a friendly, and then we've got Belgium at home, and that is they talk about being a 6-pointer. It's more than that almost. It's shit or bust.
That should essentially confirm you for at least a qualifying spot, right?
It's that we've got a playoff because of our Nation League finish, and that's again the hugely complicated manner of qualification these days. But again, that can be a bit of a lottery. We've negotiated it previously fairly well, but you're not always going to keep coming through, I don't suppose. Who we'd possibly get, no idea at the moment. It's too early to say. And as you know, because you were sort of saying it before we started recording in terms of Greece, Northern Ireland, Scotland, 2 other countries in UEFA, they're only just starting their qualifying campaign, whereas we're closer to the business end of it. So yeah, it's still a lot up in the air. Is it in our hands? I don't think it is, actually. I can't really see Belgium dropping many more points. They've still got Liechtenstein to play at home, so there's a cricket score and 3 points in the bag already. So we need somebody to take some points off Belgium, and I've not seen enough from Kazakhstan or North Macedonia to suggest that they're in a position to do that, really. We needed a result out there in the last window at the end of last season, and we found ourselves 3-0 down before fighting back and then losing it late on, which was a bit of a gut punch, really, in the circumstances of it. But like I said to you, we in the same way Kazakhstan did in their second half and Belgium did, we will give opportunities and chances to opponents for sure. So Canadian fans and the players, no doubt, are thinking we will get chances. Yeah, like I said, I'm looking forward to it. I hope it's going to be an entertaining game. It's only the second time you'll have played us in Wales. We played out back in 2004. Can I press you for any recollections of that game? Or
I was 6 years old, so I don't think you're going to get anything out of me there.
I was behind the goal at the racecourse in Wrexham when Paul Parry scored early on, and it was the winner. Pat Onstad was in goal. Who else we got here? Dwayne De Rosario, Paul Pescasolido. Crikey, there's a blast from the past. He'd have been coming to the end of his career, I'm sure, at that point. Mark Bircham's another name that some people over here will remember. Ian Hume, Julian de Guzman, Jason DeVos, Mark Watson. These are all players who played either from the start or came on. Frank Yallop was the coach at the time.
Okay. But
Craig Bellamy played the full 90 in that game. So he's the only connection, unless there's anybody else. Am I thinking? Martin Margetson, that's an issue. So Martin Margetson's our goalkeeping coach, and he made his only international appearance in the second half. So, and he'd have kept the clean sheet. So he'll have fond memories of facing Canada. 21 years ago, crikey, it doesn't feel that long ago. But said, and there's those 2 other games then in 1986. I will show you the link. A friend of the podcast, Rhian Williams, has written something, but it's in Welsh, so you may have to run it through some translator. But he looks at some of the connections and the links between, the footballing connections between our 2 countries.
Yeah, I mean, there's a massive Welsh demographic in Canada, so I wouldn't be surprised, eventually, making their way from a footballing perspective into, finding a connection there.
Well, I'll give you a name here. It's in Yuan's blog, but I'll give you a name here. It's the only full male international that we've ever capped, born in Canada. His name was Leo Newton.
He's born in Nova Scotia.
Where am I? There we go. He was born in 1888. Only won the 1 cap for us. He was in a 3-2 home defeat against Ireland in 1912, 13th of April. And he was playing for Cardiff Corinthians, which are an old kind of, as the name suggests, amateur team. Supplied a few internationals down the years, but he's born in Halifax. Yeah, you're right, Nova Scotia. When you see, and you go back in the books, the history books, and it's often against Ireland, you see players representing Wales for teams like Cardiff Corinthians. There's someone here from Treharris. I'd be amazed if anybody else from Treharris has ever played for Wales while not from Treharris, while playing for Treharris Football Club. It usually suggests that the game, and it was on a Saturday, so it clashed with the English Football League programme, and so a lot of the English clubs would have refused Welsh players' release. But yeah, so that's probably what was the story behind Leo Newton's call-up, and that was his only appearance, so there we go.
Well, it's a nice bit of Canadian footballing history there. I did not know that.
Yeah, but of course, you will be familiar with our Wales women's manager. Yes. Yeah,
that's a bona fide national treasure right there.
Maybe to round off, tell us a little bit more from a Canadian perspective about Rhian and how she's regarded there, because she's obviously just taken the women to our first ever tournament as well. So she's made a good impression. I hope we can hold on to her. I think we probably can, because I know previous job before the Wales job there was a little bit of a cloud over how that came to an end. So maybe we gave her an opportunity, maybe where maybe 1 or 2 others possibly wouldn't. We don't need to go into any of that necessarily. So I'm hoping she's going to hang around and continue to build on what she's already achieved. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about how she's regarded over there.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I hold a great deal of admiration because she's born about 15 minutes away from me in one town over. So, as far as woman from the province of Quebec. She's one of the all-time great athletes from our area, and of course she was part of that 2012-2016 team that won 2 Olympic medals, which again effectively put Canadian soccer, from not just women's soccer but Canadian soccer altogether, on the map, because the men's team, this is a great generation they've got going on now, but even before COVID the team was nowhere to be found, right? They were relegated to kind of, a bunch of MLS players that are going there and they're doing good work and they're trying their best. But the women's team were a world-class team, actively one of the best teams in the world. So by comparison, the men's team was just there. And so, Rhian Wilkinson is obviously for that. And, just the work she's done, not just for Canadian soccer, but also for Quebec soccer, is enormous. And so she's extremely well regarded here. And, there's a bit of an insight. She played for Portland, and she was, the manager for a year in Portland before she came to Wales. And there's a joke because Portland, for some reason, whether it's MLS or NWSL, just gets so many Canadians. It's called Portlandia, as a joke. And, the fact that she was also a manager, it's also one of the best markets in women's soccer in North America. So the fact that she's now coaching the Welsh team it's just another thread connecting the two countries. But yeah, she's so well regarded here. She is, again, like I said, a bona fide national treasure here.
And to what extent might Canadians have been taking an interest in the Women's Euros and Wales taking part because of that connection then with Rhian Wilkinson?
There's one podcast called the Footy Prime podcast. There's also one called She Scores Bangers, which is hosted by former women's national team members. And it's a huge podcast here, and they paid it a lot of attention because Rhian Wilkinson was a member of the podcast before she went off to go coach in Wales. So yeah, I know there's a lot of attention here because, again, she's regarded as a legend of the sport. So the fact that she's coaching a national team, I'm not saying that everyone turned out in droves to watch the Euro or any more than usual, but there was definitely more media attention and definitely being watching from afar, than a Wales team that, still there's a decent amount of Welsh people in Canada, but definitely more than support than what was expected if there wasn't a Canadian coach in the team.
Well, she's, like I said, she's made a good impression. You can't argue with getting us to a tournament. We'd fallen short a little bit before, but in comparison to what Canadian football, women's football is at the level it's at, we've got a long way to go. But participation numbers are up, and my daughter's involved in football and plays it to a decent standard, and it's important that they have those role models, and maybe 10 years ago where there were still opportunities to play, you didn't have the profile, you didn't necessarily have the role models. Now there's opportunities and there's role models, and there's people to look up to, there's pathways and all that kind of stuff. So it's evolving and developing and improving at a rapid pace, the women's game in Wales, from a small base. But I think what helps obviously is having, frankly, when England win tournaments, the England women's team win tournaments, I suppose that is ultimately we got to bite our lip, this side of the border, because that provides a boon to the domestic game in England, and that's basically where the professional game is in the UK. That, and it's probably largely the same for Scottish and Irish players as well, Northern Irish and Irish players. Is if they want to get on in the game, and I know there's obviously clubs on the continent, and I know obviously we've got Jess Fishlock and Hara James playing in Seattle, and I know plenty of other players have had their opportunities in North America. But actually, to have a professional league on your doorstep in England, that is going to expose our players to a better standard. That's ultimately, I think there is a benefit. As much as it pains me to say it, when England win tournaments, it's a shame they've got to kind of give us a 6-0 drubbing on the way to doing it. But like I said, it's all heading in the right direction, so that's good. And I don't know what her future holds. Whether she's probably got aspirations, I guess, to coach her country, her other country, in the form of Canada. But while she's here, we'll do our best to look after her. You can rest assured.
That's very appreciated. I mean, it's also not that fair, I mean, your group was a horrifying group, France, England, and the Netherlands. Being drawn into that is not, you're already starting behind the 8 ball, so
it was the gods of tournament groups were not on our side when all those balls were pulled out of the pot. But to be fair to Rhian, she didn't make any excuses. There was no kind of, oh, well, they're going to go to make up the numbers. Isn't it hard? Woe is us. You know, I think she knew how tough a challenge it was going to be, but she made no excuses. And I think it's important now that she's able to build on that. So like I said, I do hope we can hold on to her, because she took the job. I mean, frankly, you know, I don't think the FAW had any expectations for Rhian Wilkinson to be in post. I mean, it was because her predecessor left, Gemma Granger, left to go and manage Norway. So, you know, we felt we had the appointment, I'm sure, to take us into tournaments and hopefully get us over the line. So she took it on a little bit unexpectedly. I don't imagine this necessarily was the opportunity she was looking for or was expecting to have. So I'm hoping she can stay and we can continue to build on it. But if she doesn't, I think she'll go with our very best wishes, because she's taken us to a first women's tournament, and nobody can take that away from her, really. So yeah, no, she's made a grand impression. So yeah, I'm conscious of time. It's a weekend. I really appreciate you, Elias, for giving up of your time.
My pleasure, absolutely.
Maybe after the game on Tuesday, we can maybe get together, have a little bit of a review of it. Will it be sort of on, you know, primetime television? Is it deep in the cable channels for you over there? Will it be broadcast? You know,
the game against Romania was broadcast on the main, you know, sports channels, English and French. And let me check to see. Yeah, same thing. It's going to be on, you know, TSN, which are our equivalent of Sky Sports. It's going to be on the French one as well. So yeah, it's prime time.
Well, I imagine it'll be on S4C, which is the Welsh language channel that we have. So if you fancy maybe a change and picking up another language, then or bits of another language, then you might be able to try to find S4C over there. But I'll be at the game anyway, going along with the kids. I know, you know, we don't play at Swansea all that often. Very often, certainly when we've taken women's games down west to Llanelli as well, you always get a young crowd turning up. So which is good. You know, that's important, and it is important that we take games out of Cardiff, which is one thing the women's game does do. The women's internationals do get moved around and about, and it is nice to see another part of our little country.
Yeah, we feel the same way with Toronto. The men's national team is finally coming to Montreal in October for the first time in God knows how long. But the women's team come here often. But yeah, you know, all the games are in Toronto, and the rest of the country kind of scoffs a little bit.
Right. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Because I don't imagine if they're playing in Vancouver or something. That's. I mean, I'm complaining about. Well, not complaining, but I'm thinking, okay, I've got to beat the traffic now on Tuesday afternoon just to go down a 45-minute drive to Swansea. But yeah, your country's just a different scale altogether.
It's a 7-hour flight, so it's basically an international flight.
Yeah, I wonder how many Waleses you could fit into Canada. It's probably a lot, but anyway, that's something to ask Alexa a little bit later. Elias, I'm really grateful for your time. Merci beaucoup. Like I said, best luck for the game, and maybe we can get together and shoot the breeze over how it went after Tuesday.
Absolutely, I'd love that. Thank you again for having me. It was really nice talking about it. And
if anybody wanted to listen a little bit more to your podcast, or a little bit where your work is writing about Canadian football, do you want to give some plugs?
Yeah, so you can find all my writing at the Canadian Press's website. It's right there at Canadian Press Sports. And our podcast is live every Sunday at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. And we post videos, recaps, interviews, previews for games. If you want to, kind of get into MLS, this is a great entry point. And you find us on all our social media handles, or YouTube, or what have you, even your Spotify or your Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. It's all The Ball Is Round Montreal. And don't be shy to come and say hi.
I know she likes you. It's not as if I'm being sent off to war. There are worse things in this world. There's still room in my wooden horse for two. I was Jonathan to your David. You're still king.